Hello, you're listening to Wine Blast with me, Susie Barry, and my husband and fellow master of wine, Peter Richards. So welcome. And in this episode, we're not only going to take you on a trip in terms of geography, we're also going to be travelling back in time.
There we go, time travel. I knew we'd get there in the end. You know, all this wine guff is really just a cover for our top secret research into quantum physics, you know. That and watching Back to the Future on repeat, you know. Well, it depends. We've got different roles here. But no, this is a really exciting episode. I can't wait to get started.
Yeah. So leaving quantum physics aside, in this episode, we're going to travel to the remote reaches of southwest France, a land of wine that time forgot. In particular, we're heading to the regions of Gascony and Saint-Mont, where one particularly ancient vineyard was planted before phylloxera in the 19th century, and which has been found to contain several wine grape varieties that are unknown to modern science.
Unknown, as in alien.
Ooh, could be.
We're getting to X-Files territory here. I'm loving where this is going.
Alien vibes.
I'm seeing it now.
I'm not sure that's quite what we're talking about here. More a case, I would say, of peering back into the depths of vine history, because we're going to be exploring how these ancient grape varieties are being rescued from the brink of oblivion, all with the aim of helping the wine world fight back against climate change. Is it sounding Hollywood enough for you yet?
It really is, and it's really working for me. Absolutely. Maybe just think about it. Maybe it's more Frollywood than Hollywood. You know, Frollywood, as opposed to Bollywood. You know, Hollywood, Bollywood.
Got it.
Frollywood, maybe? No,
anyway,
or was that just particularly lame?
The good news is, beyond the Frollywoods, this is also helping socially and in terms of sustainability more widely. So it's all part of a really fascinating story. And this story is focused around the Plaimont cooperative, one of the biggest such producers in France, and certainly one of, if not the most forward-thinking, innovative and dynamic co-ops in the country. And Plaimont is working to preserve and promote the historic diversity of grape varieties in a part of the country which they themselves admit made some of, and I quote, the worst wine in France 40 years ago.
That's quite something to hold your hands up to, isn't it?
At least they're admitting it.
No, exactly. It's fair enough. I really like that.
They're very honest.
Very honest. And, you know, what I'm seeing here, if we're framing it in the Hollywood sort of context, it's a sort of plucky fight back sort of story. You know, I love those stories. But, you know, my problem with them is they rarely involve enough wine.
Oh, this one will.
So I think we're going to solve both those.
Blockbuster with booze.
Anyway,
here's a small taster of what's to come.
Southwest France is around 10% of the French production in wine, but it's nearly 40 to 45% of the biodiversity in grapes. We had this incredible potential in diversity. The region was nearly dead. Right now, we are alive. The potential of Gascony is really, really special. Maybe one of the regions of the future.
So lots to explore. Now, that was Olivier Bourdet-Pees from Plaimont, and we'll be hearing more from him in due course. We'll also be tasting a fair few intriguing wines that help tell the story. And we should say from the outset, many thanks to the AOC Saint-Mont for sponsoring this podcast and allowing us to turn our attention to such an intriguing tale.
Indeed. So I think we probably need to sort of set the scene a bit, don't we? To start, you know, where are we? What are we talking about?
Sure. Okay. So we're in southwest France. We're between Bordeaux and the Pyrenees Mountains, inland from the Atlantic Ocean. In terms of landscape, we're talking verdant, rolling hills and fields, and there's a fair bit of rain here too. They play rugby. They occasionally wear berets, bit of a link with the Basque country over in the Pyrenees, and they love their food. You know, duck and foie gras are two very famous local products.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if these three things go together. You know, I'm not sure they necessarily do. But maybe one thing that links them is the love of wine.
Love of wine.
You know, I think particularly drinking wine and beret-wearing. I wonder if those two go hand in hand.
And rugby
quite
play?
closely. I'm not sure about rugby play.
A bit more tricky.
Afterwards. But, you know, anyway, the local wine growing culture dates back centuries in this part of the world, at least as far back as the Romans, then developed by religious communities and monasteries, partly to serve the tide of pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage route, which passes through here into northern Spain, of course.
Yeah, but that was a while ago. And as pilgrimage highways faded in importance, this area fell off the beaten track. It was also given the cold shoulder by Bordeaux, which was the dominant regional commercial hub and port. You know, the Bordeaux merchants wanted to prioritise their own wine rather than the wines from up country, as they saw them. So they restricted access for other regions to the port.
Yeah, and all this meant that these areas in southwest France retained a traditional culture. You know, they didn't race to modernise. They kept a fabric of small holdings, often polycultures, producing everything from livestock to fruit and veg and wines. This process inadvertently ensured the retention of local wine grapes. It's estimated that there are 300 different grape varieties in this part of the world, of which 120 are indigenous.
And can you even name that many grape varieties? I mean, I couldn't. Yeah, it's quite 120
really
indigenous.
When
I mean,
you
it's
actually
such
think
a
about
thought.
that.
Yeah.
You know, I get stuck after Chardonnay. You know,
that's because you drink too much.
Exactly. I get stuck in more ways than one. This is very true. Anyway, let's move on. Now, this is also the land of Armagnac, the famous French brandy. But there came a time in the 1970s when, you know, as delightfully rural and bucolic as life in this part of the world was, local producers were facing ruin. Prices for grapes and wine were rock bottom, partly because the wines were pretty dodgy back then, exactly as you've said. So things were looking pretty grim.
They were. But then along came André Dubosc, a third-generation wine grower. Now, he saw the scale of the problem and he encouraged local growers to choose a side. So we are looking a bit more rugby now, aren't we?
Scrum down.
Anyway, those two sides were Armagnac or wine, but not both. He then helped set up the Plaimont Union of Cooperatives in 1979, a cooperative being a winery sort of jointly owned by shareholding farmers or grape growers who come together and pool resources to make and to sell their wine. And Monsieur Dubosc encouraged not only pride in the local grapes and wines, but also galvanised the local producers to be ambitious and, you know, open-minded.
So Plaimont has about 800 winemaking families. It's not bad, is it?
It's a lot,
and
isn't
its
it?
collective vineyard covers around 5,300 hectares. So this is big. This is big.
Yeah.
It produces wine from all over the region, but its heartland is the AOC, the appellation Saint-Mont. M-O-N-T, which lies within the broader Cotes de Gascogne area and is a kind of extension of the Madiran appellation. In terms of geography, we're talking north of Pau and directly west of Toulouse in the foothills of the Pyrenees.
Yeah, so here the specialities in terms of wines are fresh whites and sturdy, kind of punchy reds.
Yeah, we've got some of these right here in front of us.
We
They're
do.
positively winking at us.
Hold your horses. Now, before we come on to the wines, so we've painted a picture of this region, but I do think we should hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were. So Olivier Bourdet-Pees is a trained winemaker and CEO of Plaimont. He's a man who wears a beret very well, I would
Now,
say.
that's true.
It's worth a Google, isn't
We'll
it?
take some lessons from him.
We might put a couple of pictures on our site. Anyway, I asked him to give us a brief overview of the region.
Many people do know about south of France, but there is a small part of south of France, which is the foothills of the Pyrenees, where the influence, the climatic influence of the Atlantic Ocean and of the Pyrenees make this region really rainy, really fresh, with a climate totally different with the other parts of south of France. That makes this particular viticulture with traditional grapes coming from that zone, original ones. The main part, 95% of the wine growers here are using only grapes born in that region, and this is the big particularity because of the climate, because of the choices of the wine growers here in the regions. We did that job, which is really unique, maybe in France. different kind of grapes to explain this wonderful terroir.
And just before we talk about the grapes, what about the food and the culture in the region?
Yeah, culture, maybe Southwest is a bit more known for this because, well, I think it's a region where living there is a privilege, maybe a region a bit away from the beaten tracks, that make maybe in Gascony much more than in other regions, the ability to live in a quiet moment with the families, with the friends. It's a really particular region for that. And then the quality of the food, the quality of the wines is really very well known. And maybe Gascony is much more known for the duck, for for the cheeses, for the Pyrenees, and many things, for the black pig, a very wonderful black pig in the region. So the quality, the living quality is really unique.
And why would you say history is important in this part of the wine world?
Yeah, again, history, maybe the main part is, again, in history, being close to the Spanish countries, being close to the Pyrenees, far away from everything, I would say. There is no motorway in our region, for example. Now, it's that made a specific way of thinking, the way of living. The people were there. Polyculture was the tradition there. They were eating what they were producing. So they didn't make the choices made everywhere else in the world. They did their own life, our way of seeing life, and their own choices on making their products for food or for wine, for example.
No motorway. It sounds both idyllic and a bit slow.
Frustrating.
Yeah. But, I love the emphasis on food and wine and living well.
Yeah, and notice, Olivier talks about the mentality and choices people make, including retaining their local grapes.
Yeah, so this is where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? And you definitely asked him a bit more about that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. So here's what he said when I asked him to tell me a bit more about these magical grapes.
Southwest France is around 10% of the production, the French production in wine, but it's nearly 40 to 45% of the biodiversity in grapes. We had this incredible potential in diversity with the traditional grapes coming from the foothills of the Pyrenees. A lot of regions lost their traditions, but here in the Southwest, we kept those traditions, and we are still working with our own grapes. Each appellation in the region is using its own grapes. That makes maybe sometimes a bit complexity, I would say, for sure. But the potential, the huge diversity we have to face, the willing of the society to have different kind of wines, the ability to adapt to the climatic changes is huge when you have those tools. Those grapes are the tools able to answer the big challenges we have to face.
And you work with some really historic grape varieties, don't you? So can you tell us about those? Which are the most historic? What do they taste like? How easy are they to work with?
In Plaimont, in my company, we have, in my co-op, we have the most important conservatory, private conservatory in France. We have in Plaimont 39 disappeared grapes, completely disappeared, and they were disappeared because the willing of the wine growers 1 century, 2 centuries, or 5 centuries ago was to stop with them, because they were not adapted to the willing of the moment,
In terms of
right now,
is that in terms of flavor or in terms of their productivity, or what was it that?
For example, Susie, I don't know if you taste the Mont Saint-Noir, for example, the wine Mont Saint-Noir. The Manzanois is a grape really close to Tannat, but the ability of Manzanois to produce sugar is much lower than Tannat, for example. So when the climate was so fresh, it was so difficult 2 centuries ago to get the perfect maturity, to get the level of alcohol they were focused on in this moment. They stopped with Manzanois and they went. Everyone went to the Tannat with at least 2 to 3 degrees more in potential, in alcohol potential. Right now, if the situation is changing a little bit with the climatic changes, with the willing of the society and our customers, maybe Manzanois is a big answer, natural answer present on the territory, really close, root and linked to this territory, but able to answer what people are waiting right now. Yeah? They want more freshness, they want less alcohol, they want more drinkability maybe in the wines. They are not always able to wait for 10 years in a bottle to have the perfect wine. So Manzanois is really one of the answers for the future. It's an example. We have many of them. Maybe we had a very late grape that it was impossible to get the maturity, the tannic maturity, the phenolic maturity in those grapes, because they were picked, I don't know, again, 2 centuries ago, end of November or middle of November. It was impossible to wait that time. So they stopped with that grape. But maybe, again, with the evolution of the temperature, this grape right now is able to be picked in middle of October or beginning of October, which is huge for us to have this kind of possibilities, you know.
And do you have yourself a kind of a favorite one of the revived grapes, or one with a particular story?
All of them are my sons, you know. It's impossible to choose, but I will tell you, I have maybe Manzanois is one. Tardif. Tardif in French means late. You can imagine that the wine grower 3 or 4 centuries ago that gave this name to this grape, I'm not sure he was in love with it. It was late. Tardif was not good for him. So, but maybe, you know, it's maybe a privilege to have a very late grape in those moments, able to have a long, slow maturity with the ambition of the wine growers right now. So Tardif is incredible. It's driven by an aromatic expression, very spicy, given by a molecule that the name of that molecule is rotundone. It's black pepper, green pepper. The complexity is huge. It's so easy to drink. Really, aromatically, maybe it's my favorite. Tardif is really something incredible. And then I have my, you know, it's we have sons that are not so easy. You know, a son that is not perfect by itself, but maybe when you use it in a blend, it can bring something very incredible. But I would think about Aruffiac, which is maybe a tannic, a bitter white grape. By itself, maybe it's not wonderful, but you know, the drinkability, the small bitterness it gives to the end of a mouth in the mouth when you have too much sun, when the mouth is a bit fat, you know, it's wonderful to think about that kind of grapes to help the blends.
So I'm still trying to get my head around the fact that they have a conservatory with 39 grapes that previously had disappeared off the landscape into viticultural nirvana, but which now they've rescued and are bringing sort of back from oblivion.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a big part of what they're doing, you know, hugely valuable work, not just historical and cultural value, but also this is something that's proving incredibly useful in the fight against climate change. You know, as Olivier said, varieties that were too late ripening in the past are now coming into their own because growers want less sugar and ripeness in their grapes because otherwise alcohol levels are too high in this ever warming climate.
Yeah, and it's not just about heat, is it? But, coping with other things too, like drought or frost or hail or rot or other kinds of pests and diseases, which are coming into play because climate change is shifting the goalposts in terms of local conditions for all those things.
Yeah,
well.
I mean, and who knows what more resources we'll need in the future to perhaps even adapt further. Anyway, let's go from theory to practical, shall we? Because Olivier talked about a couple of grape varieties and wines which we've got here to taste.
Now you're talking my language. No, we're calling it a practical these days, aren't we? Brilliant, fantastic. Okay,
practical.
whatever we're calling it. First up, we got a couple of cheeky white blends featuring the Arufiac grape that Olivier mentioned as giving a sort of that lovely, pleasant, gentle bitterness to a wine. I often think when you talk about bitterness, it sounds bad, doesn't it? But actually in wine, it can just a little bit can be good, can't it?
But just like that sort of pithy, zestiness.
Yeah,
almost.
it just brings
nice.
the way it grounds a wine, especially a white wine. So anyway, the first one is the Plaimont Saint-Mont Grande Cuvée Tradition 2020. It's a blend of Gros Manseng, Petit Corbu and Arufiac. As you said, it's about £9.50 at Tesco, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, it just does that classic trick of the best Southwest French whites. It manages to be fresh, really fresh and cleansing and juicy, but it's also complex and quite broad. It's got flavours of, there's some honey there, some stone fruit, a bit of red apple, dried herbs.
Yeah.
I think so much wine for your money. I actually remember pairing wines like this on Saturday Kitchen, and they were a gift in terms of food and wine matching because they just went with everything. So amazing value too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not your average supermarket white, is it? Maybe a good alternative to Albarino or Pinot Grigio, whatever you sort of tend to drink, or Chablis or Sancerre even.
I think definitely Chablis, yeah.
Okay, good alternative there. But anyway, we've got another one here. It's the Plaimont Saint-Mont Vignes Retrouvées 2021. It's the same blend. It's Gros Manseng, Petit Corbu, Arufiac, £9.50, same sort of price at the Wine Society this time. And it tastes sort of like a younger, slightly greener version of the Grand Cuvée, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. It's zesty. And as you say, that slightly younger taste, crisper taste with a touch of white pepper on the finish. So, thumbs up to white blends starring Arufiac.
Yeah. I think generally the whites in this part of the world are really exciting.
You're right.
All these interesting grape varieties, Arufiac being one. So
different.
Now we've got a couple of reds. First up is the Monseigne Noir Planète Cépage 2022 Côte de Gascogne IGP. It's about £11 at the Wine Society. So not expensive. As Olivier said, it's quite low alcohol. It's 11.9%. You look at it, it's really dark in colour, but it's really kind of upbeat and sprightly in taste, isn't it? Sort of aromatic and very tangy and lively on the palate. Sort of lovely, bright, refreshing style of red.
Totally. I mean, I really like this. As you said, very dark, meaty, got some floral notes, but some nice chalky tannin. I love the fact it's lower alcohol, because it doesn't lack on character because it's lower alcohol, which is quite rare. You've got character, you've got flavour.
Yes, you can happen, can't it? If you get lower alcohol, it can just be lean and boring.
Absolutely, and this is not at all. And it's lovely and refreshing with food. It's uplifting. So you've got maybe a plate of cold meat or even, I don't know, spag bol or something.
Absolutely.
Just something simple.
And also, I think it's a style that's really quite fun and a little bit, I don't know, a bit quirky maybe. I think there's a lot they can do with this kind of style of winemaking, making styles that are just fun. In the reds. I think it's really, really good. Anyway, now we've got a wine from the famous or perhaps infamous Tardif variety, as Olivier was talking about, which apparently does not exist in the record books, by the way. I did check.
I bet you did.
I did check, and I couldn't find any reference.
So maybe it does not exist.
Monseigne Noir does, but not Tardif. So we literally are tasting the unknown here. That point is made pretty clear by the picture of the dodo on the label, which is it's quite a nice touch. This is actually a Vin de France because, again, I think it's sort of experimental one, but it's nice. But this, and it's called the J'aurais dû être Tardif 2021.
Yeah, it's pretty punchy, isn't it? I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure it's my favourite. It's pretty full on in terms of tannins. You've got a lot of black fruit intensity, but it's also quite rustic. It did go okay with a pulled pork chili that we made, but I think it's a work in progress. It's got potential, but I'd still go with the Monseigne Noir at the moment. Yeah,
I tend to agree. I mean, they might tinker with how they make it and whatnot. But anyway, I'd definitely I'd stick with the Monseigne Noir or the whites actually.
Definitely.
Again, all made with local varieties, something a bit different. And I do think the Tardif is a project they're still working on rather than a big commercial release for now. Anyway, we're going to talk a bit more about Tardif and ancient pre-phylloxera vineyards in a bit, together with more tasting and how all of this is shaping a unique future for Saint-Mont and southwest France. To recap so far, southwest France is not only full of hearty food and beautiful Pyrenean landscapes, it's also a treasure trove of ancient grape varieties, which are now being repurposed in the fight against climate change. So we might be hearing a little bit more about grapes like Arufiac and Monseigneur and Tardif in the future.
Indeed. Now, as far as I understand it, Tardif, whether it exists or not, was actually one of the unknown varieties that was discovered in a vineyard in Saint-Mont that's over 200 years old and which has managed to survive everything from phylloxera to the relentless march of modernity. So I wanted to ask Olivier about these ancient vineyards. Two in particular stand out. One is a national monument in a place called Sarragachy, owned by the Pedder-Bernard family, which was planted in the early 1800s, where they found these lost varieties. That one doesn't make a bottled commercial wine, but then there's another one which they do make a wine from, which we tried, and which we will come on to after this.
So in Saint-Mont appellation, which is maybe the first main appellation in Plaimont zone and one of the most famous appellation in the foothills of the Pyrenees, we have two different pre-phylloxeric vineyards. The one you were talking about was planted under Napoleon I, very beginning of the 19th century. It is more than 200 years old right now. And the last thing of that incredible plot is that it's a very small one and you have 21 different grapes. All of them are disappeared. We don't know. Sometimes we don't know even their name. And 7 of them, we don't know anything about them. And some of them are so ancient that they are female. They are not hermaphrodite grapes. They don't have on the same plant the male and the female flower. So it's very protected. It's an incredible plot, really.
And it's still producing enough yield to make wine from?
Wine in experimentation, not a bottle, I would say, in that plot, because you have 2, 3, 4 plants of each different grape, so it's difficult, but we are experimenting a lot. We are trying to understand why this plot resisted to phylloxera, why this plot resisted with the average production we have. It's incredible. Why this plot gave us this incredible diversity. It's a unique, and it's unique in France. It is the only one recognized as a historical monument in France right now. It was recognized in the year 2011, and it is still the only one. And there is another one. Maybe you tasted again the wine. There is the youngest pre-phylloxeric one in Saint-Mont. It's a plot planted in the year 1871, so not so young, to be honest. But so no rootstock at all. Planted on tannat, only tannat, and in that plot, Alpha Nectar, we are producing a wine, and it's a bit, the roof of our production. It's really something incredible to see the potential of the wines when you're working with this material. No selection at all. The diversity inside the plot is unique, so that gives a complexity to the wine that is really huge.
And that's your top wine, you'd say?
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, at the end, I am in love with that Cuvée. I don't know if I am right, but you have when you are facing this, you are facing the work of 6, 7, 8 generations of wine growers, maybe more 7 to 8, that kept this potential they didn't sell any wine for more than 1 century. It was only for their own consumption. They were protecting this. They are giving that plot and that unique plot to their sons, and the son worked with it during 30, 40 years, and it gave this to his own son or daughter, and without earning any money, only by conviction, they were linked to this small garden, And I arrived 10 years ago and I saw this. It was 15 years ago now, and I saw this history, this potential, this willing of generation and generation. And when you are facing the wine, it's really a privilege, something very, very special to walk this plot. For me is unique, and I am pretty sure that if you are lucky enough to have the wine in front of you, it's an emotion that is very specific.
Well, we can talk about that emotion now because we have this amazing one-off wine in front of us in our glasses. But before we come on to that, it is quite some thought, isn't it? Tasting the fruit of vines that are over 150 years old. The sort of work, it's not really work, is it? It's more passion. It's more it's just a treasure of generations. I know what he means. It sort of sends a shiver down your spine, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but just to shift focus for a moment to the older vineyard he talked about, the one planted in the early 1800s. So as Olivier said, they have 7 vine varieties there that they just can't identify. And as he said, some are female, not hermaphrodite. So just putting that into context, all modern winemaking vines are hermaphrodite because it means they produce fruit more reliably and abundantly. You don't have to fertilize the flowers for them to become baby grapes.
Yeah, and that's almost a glimpse of sort of prehistory of humanity as well as for winemaking, isn't it? You're almost going back to the Near East and Caucasus region and seeing these sort of early civilizations bringing wild vines out of the forests where they would have been growing up the trees and then domesticating them, planting them out. And of course, they would be choosing the hermaphrodite vines because those ones gave the best yields. So it's a sort of crazy thought. We're peering into this prehistory sort of here.
And although, as Olivier said, they're not making wine from that oldest plot because it's too small, they are doing lots of research. And that's something they really focus on there, doing the research, studying these ancient vines to see what we can learn, how they can help make modern wine knowledge and what they're doing with the wines today, more progressive. Yeah.
And talking of wine today, back to our glasses.
Oh, here we go.
Let's taste. We've got the very special Vignes Préphyloxérique Saint-Mont 2021. It's from this ancient pre-phylloxera vineyard planted in 1871 in Saint-Mont that Olivier described. It's 0.48 hectares, so just under half a hectare of ungrafted tannat. There are a few other bits and bobs in there, but I think they don't use them in this wine. It's a beautiful bottle. What do we make of the wine?
Well, it is very special, isn't it? It feels like there's almost a universe in this wine. You can kind of almost taste the history. It's like a time machine in itself, isn't it? But nuts and bolts. It's got a beautiful fragrance, lots of dark fruit with floral and herbal hints, very Southern French. But you get this very fine textured, quite sort of linear palate profile, very pure with juicy dark fruit acidity, and then some chalky tannin, a little bit of spice. I mean, it's quite upright and sturdy, but also very layered and complex. There's just tons going on. Not for the faint-hearted.
Sort of puts hairs in your chest, doesn't it?
In a good way.
In a good way.
It's a really good way.
And you kind of, I like your description. It sort of captures the essence of red wines from the region, doesn't it?
It really does.
There's a real sort of intensity there, a sort of uncompromising energy and vigour. It's bold. I think that's a word I'd associate with a lot of the reds from here. Touch of rusticity, yes. I'd say it's really quite young and tense, isn't it?
It is, but it drinks well, doesn't it?
It drinks really well. And I think that it's that fresh fruit, ironically, in there, actually, that's helping it drink really well. It helps it balance out the tannin and the acidity. And I think, actually, I would recommend drinking this wine, even though it's pretty intense, relatively young, to retain, so you get that fresh fruit in there. Don't stick it away for ages. I mean, you called it upright or something like that, didn't you? And I think that's a good description. It's quite an intellectual style. It sort of makes you think, doesn't it? doesn't it? You get the finesse as well as the power, and definitely another one for food.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was thinking about this, and I reckon that duck shepherd's pie we made a few episodes back in our Southern French feast programme would be really good with this. So that's quite a special wine. But I also wanted to ask Olivier about other aspects of what Plaimont does, things like the cheaper end of the spectrum, Cotes Gascogne whites, the bread and butter stuff, if you like. So here's what he had to say about good value Gascony wines, among other things.
Well, the price for originality, I would say, is because that region was not so recognized. It was nearly dead 40 years ago, to be honest. This region, was living with maybe alcohol production mainly more Armagnac production. And when Armagnac production has its own difficulty 50, 60, 70 years ago, the region was nearly dead. Right now, we are alive, proud to be able to present those incredible products. The potential of Gascony is really, really special. And at the end, maybe the climatic evolution is coming to us. We were too fresh 100 years ago, 50 years ago, to have the good balance, the good potential to be recognized as a top region in the world for wine production. But more and more, those regions are maybe one of the regions of the future. So, I'm proud to be still being a wonderful price and originality and price value. And I'm pretty sure that more and more people are looking for our wines, looking for that kind of experience. When you are drinking, 100 Chardonnay a year, or it's still a good moment to discover something really new. Italian people were wonderful to keep that and to give value to that. We are trying to do the same with the same ambition, and lucky are the people who are able to discover our wines. I'm not talking about Plaimont, but the wines of the region. If you are going to Madiran, to Pacherenc, to Jurançon, to Irouléguy in the Pays Basque, you will find wonderful wines, affordable wines at the end, but with an incredible potential to make you travel.
What are you doing as a cooperative to be sustainable?
I don't know if you are looking for this, but in this moment in France, all the agricultures are a bit in difficulties. They are, a bit fighting in the road because they are on strike, because many of them are suffering. So giving them back the money we are able to bring back to the territory is something very important for sure. And then to be able to do that, we have to have an interest in the production we are giving to the people who are believing in us. And for this, we have to improve the way we are producing the grape in terms of quality of the grapes, diversity of the grapes, on the ability to make each wonderful project able to exist. We are not a co-op where we want to blend big tanks. If we have to produce a wine coming from Alpha Nectar, coming from a prefluxuric vineyard with a unique wine grower, incredible wine grower in that plot, we have to do that. And we will produce 1,000 bottles a year of that plot. That makes the possibility for a customer to be interested in what is happening in our region. And then we will try to sell him, to share with him another cuvée or another history with the plot in front of that one. But we have to do everything in the quality of the history of and the roots of what we want to be. And then, for sure, to improve the way we are producing the grape, having less problems for our territory with pesticides, with the CO2 pollution in what we are. Everything is adapted in Plaimont to improve days after days. We are not perfect, but days after days, the project is to improve. We don't have all the answers for everything, but we are looking for them in each part of our production.
And just looking at winemaking in general, how it's changed over the years in your part of the world. I mean, particularly vis-a-vis the sort of very powerful reds that the region is known for. You know, you talked earlier about the grape varieties that are allowing you some more freshness and lift and perhaps lighter alcohol. What is changing in terms of winemaking as well as grape varieties?
Everything, you know, we don't want to think about a curative way of facing the problems. You have to change many things. You have to be able to adapt to the moment. Technology is never an answer, never. To answer your question, very good question. For sure, in Plaimont, the potential and diversity of the grapes is one of the answers. Then maybe adapting the exposition. We are pure south, all the plots with southern exposition, with big slopes like this that were capturing a lot of energy from the sun. Where the answer was the answer of 50 years ago to catch this perfect maturity we were looking for. Right now, maybe when you are focusing the freshness and the balance, maybe those slopes won't be the answers for the future. So you have to adapt to put away your plot. You bought this plot very expensive price because it was the best in the region, and maybe it's the worst for the next century. I don't know. Maybe you have to say, okay, it's adaptation. And then, for sure, in the winery, you have to adapt. Extraction in the region was something very important. We had wonderful means to extract everything we had in the skin. We wanted to catch in the skin everything, all the tannins, all the aromas, all the color. Everything was catched by extraction. And maybe we are balancing this right now much more with infusion. You know, the grape is in the tank, and the way we are extracting the grape has completely changed because we don't want that kind of wines. We don't drink those kind of wines anymore ourselves. So we are adapting with more elegancy in the wine and more, you know, elegancy in the way we are thinking our wine making.
Olivier, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So they're adapting their methods, planting in cooler sites given global warming, extracting their reds less, so less tannin and power, aiming more and more for elegance, like we saw in that Mont Noir, you know, sort of juicy and upbeat and quaffable style rather than tannic and chewy and alcoholic and hard work, which has been a valid criticism of many of the reds from this region.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're moving with the times. You know, I think that's key. Just as Olivier said, they move from Armagnac production to wine production, focusing on what makes them unique, you know, making wines that are a bit different, a discovery almost. And that's sustainability in action, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he said the region was dead and now it's alive. So clearly they're doing the right thing, focusing on good value at one end, but also then on really unique small production wines at the other to communicate that sort of identity and uniqueness. And And I think, as I said, there are opportunities to do really quirky things too, especially with these new old varieties in the red wine spectrum. Do something fun, funky, natural, something just juicy and I don't know. Yeah.
And you also mentioned affordability, which I wanted to pick up on. And I think this is a really important point. Generally speaking, these wines are really good value. They've got a lot of character, and the price tags are incredible in that context.
Totally agree.
I would say, however alive it is, this is partly because the region still isn't very well known. Yeah,
totally agree. You can definitely pick up a bargain from here. Whites and reds, but particularly whites, I'd say. They can age and develop well. They can become really quite complex, but rarely at silly prices. That Grande Cuvée, under 10 quid. It's delicious, isn't it?
Yeah.
You compare that to other regions, mentioning no names, Burgundy. Anyway, I think on that note, we wanted to feature a couple of final bottles, didn't we?
We did, yeah. So a couple of slightly more expensive whites, but still amazing value. The first up is the Le Fête Blanc Saint-Mont 2019, which is £22. It's a blend of Gros Montseng, Petit Montseng and Petit Corbu. Really complex and rich. Tons of waxy, buttery, nutty, yeasty dried apricot fruits, quite fleshy and spicy, but with tangy acidity underneath it all. You've got that touch of age there, which is nice, a 2019 vintage. Just very multi-dimensional and with lovely texture, lovely character. And a very fair price, I think, and good with food.
It's not cheap, but I think it's a very fair price. You get so much wine.
You do.
I was also seriously impressed, talking of which, by the Cirque Nord Saint-Mont Grande Cuvée 2019. Now this is £40 at Corny and Barrow, so it's more expensive, almost twice the price, but.
It's a treat.
It's a more flinty style, again, really complex and intense, but perhaps a bit more focus and sort of drive and cogency than the Le Fête, which you'd expect, of course. There's sort of hints of curry leaf, of roasted hazelnuts and red apples. It's really broad, but also dense and tangy on the palate. It's big, but it's very serious and balanced, and that lovely typical refreshing acidity underneath it. There's so much going on there. It's sort of like a freight train hurtling along your palate. It's pretty thrilling stuff.
It sounds like it. Anyway, I wanted to perhaps move to something slightly less thrilling, but different, just a bit different. This is the Elia Côte de Gascogne IGP, much less expensive, about £8.50 at Sainsbury's. It's made from Colombard and Sauvignon Blanc, and it's only 9% alcohol. Now, it's made specifically to be in that lower alcohol category, harvested early, and then the fermentation is stopped before the end, so you get that bit of succulent sweetness to offset the tangy acidity. And it works well.
It really does.
Zesty, off dry, upbeat, perhaps for lightly spicy food, I would say.
It's a great shout, yeah, absolutely. Now, I've got a couple of others here. The Plaimont Saint-Mont Projoe 2021. It's a bit different in that it's quite a sort of creamy, leesy style of white. I think there's a bit of oak there, which is not all these wines do have a lot of oak, but it's a bit more generous. It works well to kind of put flesh around that fresh acidity. And then also a rosé, the Fleur de Lys Saint-Mont Rosé 2022. I think it's really nice. It's sort of elegant, but with good character. And we want a bit of character in our rosés these days, don't we? Yeah. And I also think, good point to make here, is that rosé is a really good option for some of these local red grapes. Actually, this one's a blend of Pinanque, which is the name for Fer Selvadou, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And I think, you can make some really juicy, fun, characterful styles.
Absolutely.
Rosé as opposed to big, hefty reds, which is really interesting. This one's only £8.
Yep. Bargain. And finally, we've got a sweet wine, the Les Autens Pacherank du Vicpil 2021. It's organic, just over £10 for a half bottle, and it's just a really lovely, sweet but not overly sweet style, not nearly as rich and heady as Sauternes would be. It's very attractive. It's got lovely orangey citrus fruits, and again, £10 for half bottle of a nice sweet wine. It's good value.
Yeah. So there we have it. We did our time travel. And we've come out the other side, having not disrupted the space-time fabric too much, I don't think. I guess time will tell. We don't know. But
I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe there's just a little bit less wine out there in the space-time fabric than there was before. But that does tend to be the result of our podcast, isn't
it? Possibly, and yes. By way of brief closing summary, Southwest France is making arguably the most exciting wines in its long and checkered history. These are wines made from characterful local grape varieties, some of whose origins are lost in the mists of time. time, but which are being repurposed for the modern era and at the same time helping growers adapt to climate change. Gascony, Saint-Mont and the Plaimont cooperative are at the heart of these intriguing developments, including working with their ancient pre-phylloxera vineyards and rescuing vine varieties from the verge of extinction. The best wines represent outstanding value for money and are brimming with character.
So well worth discovering. Thanks to Olivier Bourdet-Pees, also to AOC Saint-Mont for sponsoring this episode. Thanks also to you for listening. Until next time, cheers.